All right, Dom, welcome in. It's good to see you.
Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, man, it's an honor to have you on. This is probably one of most favorite parts of my coaching, career is, after a client does the work and, I see their successes, we invite them on and get to hear them speak a little bit about their journey working with me. And yeah, so man, it's been incredible to see from start to finish. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've done a lot of great work and yeah, happy to share my story.
So, what's funny, man, is I looked up today. It was like, when was the first day that we started working together?
Hmm.
And it was April 25th. Today's October 25th. So it's
Hmm.
been exactly 6 months
Oh, really?
from
Wow.
date to date. So to see you, what's happening in 6 months has been amazing for me.
Hmm.
Exactly. So that's
Hmm.
pretty cool, man. Um, but yeah, but let's just get off with the banger, right? So like this, what people are here for. So just, looking back to when you started, from when we first met to where you were at to where you are now, going through this program, these 6 months, what was just the biggest thing, the biggest transformation that you saw in yourself? What was the biggest change?
Hmm. Oh, I'd say the biggest change is that when we started, my nervous system was full of stored energy or stored trauma energy because I hadn't really learned to feel deeply and release um, yeah, deep experiences and emotions. And I was in a bad place, man. I was really like, it was like PTSD, panic attacks, wasn't sleeping well, waking up like in the middle of the night all the time. Like my body was like really, really like on kind of red alert. And fast forward 6 months and through a combination of life giving me experiences to help like touch that stuff, like Mickey Singer talks about. Life is always giving us experiences to touch our stuff so we can let go of it. And our conscious work, where I felt safe with you and you helped to guide me through it and to learn how to come into contact with those stored energies and different techniques to access them and observe them and allow them to move. I've had like huge, huge releases over and over, and I've developed a skill and a safety in my body of being able to do this. That my body feels much safer feeling emotions and allowing them to move. And yeah, I mean the PTS symptoms have all pretty much disappeared. My triggers also, I had significant triggers, which are I have experienced them as kind of like lesser forms of PTSD, kind of acute, narrow um, nervous system sensitivities. And whereas I feel like PTSD at large is kind of much more broad and it's like a due to like a full nervous system. I've seen my triggers dramatically reduce. I used to have really significant triggers around relationships and abandonment, around money, around not unworthiness, and similar experiences that I've had now. I just see myself, my body more specifically, be like much less reactive to nearly non-reactive, especially as I'm aware of it and catch it to allow that energy to move. Yeah, and then we continue to work on it each week. We have 2 to 3 calls a week, which for me, the density of the sessions was really important. It was I remember when I was learning salsa, and if I did a salsa class once a week, I didn't really get that much better. But when I started doing private classes and doing them 2, 3 times a week, plus social dances, I just got the reps in to be able to really make it a skill and get it into my body. And that's what you and I did. And I feel like that was critical to being able to really do the work much faster and to build the safety and the competence. and the skill with this work, and the trust, like the physical trust with it. And yeah, it's just been, honestly, it's been some of the most impactful um, therapeutic work that I've ever done. I've done, like, over the years, I'm 42 now. I've been to therapists and psychologists and acupuncture and Reiki and uh and I've done big psychedelic experiences like ayahuasca and mushrooms, and they all had their different way of helping, but I felt that, looking back, like, I was really so disconnected from feeling and from my body that I had limited results because I didn't really, I couldn't really access it. So, like, those big experiences would kind of get me a little bit, get me some exposure to it, but it didn't develop a skill and a trust and a comfort level with my body and with feeling to have an ongoing capability to let go. So I would see kind of like ups and downs. I would see kind of like ebbs and flows in my mental health, um, that would relate to me, having not been able to really let go of energy, let go of stored, kind of trauma energy as life events happened. Um, so and yeah, so this work's been fascinating because um, it for the first time in my life, I've really focused on running directly towards my emotions and feeling them and labeling them. And with your help, and using things like the map of consciousness or like the wheel of emotion, or just exploring it together, and the techniques you use, that it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife to figure out how to be able to, you know, loose, allow it space to move. We've been able to just, yeah, help me build that capacity to really feel, to emotionally regulate much better, to emotionally process. And the results for me have been outstanding. Like, I've got like, part of this whole thing kicked off with the universe giving me a big breakup that triggered a lot of old abandonment. And I was unreasonably over affected by that, but it was, as usual, it was life's gift of, giving me an opportunity to touch my stuff to help me let go of that. And, fast forward 6 months, I've got an amazing new relationship with a woman who's very well emotionally regulated. So I'm much more naturally vibing with emotionally regulated women, whereas before I was vibrating with women that had more abandonment trauma like I had. So that's been great. Like I said, I had triggers around trauma, or around money, and I've done a lot of like stock trading and such in the past, and I don't really feel those triggers like nearly as much. It's amazing, and that's made me a much more profitable trader as well, an investor. It'll help me evolve from kind of like trader to investor, and um, yeah, and I become a better friend as well because I'm more in tune with the parts of me that can be kind of misbehaving at certain times, that are causing behavior in me that I don't really find appropriate, and I can quell that, or help kind of reparent that with the work that we've done. So it's been a really interesting journey, and um, yeah, I mean, there's been moments where I've kind of had unexpected wins, or sorry, expected wins of like healing, abandonment, letting go of that has helped my relationships and helped my own self-love. But then also, like, a number of unexpected benefits because it's all like roots of a tree. So, like, me, I would be more kind and loving to my family and my friends, um, in general, because of, there being less sensitivities and triggers in my nervous system, around around abandonment, shame, and guilt and anger. And so it's shown up in expected and unexpected ways, which has been really good. And yeah, and I'm really curious and excited to continue to walk up the map of consciousness and like pay attention to where my center of gravity is on that chart and see the magic that shows up from that, allowing me to like surrender deeper into the unfolding of life. Um, so yeah, it's been great. Yeah, so that's a fair summary, I think. Yeah.
For sure. Thanks for the answer, Don, man. You've had an incredible and amazing transformation. And I know while we worked together, I had a list of all the wins that you had each session. We document their micro wins. But looking back, the summation of those small wins, bit by bit, yeah, you've become a completely new man. It's for
Mm,
sure. New energy, new person. It's been amazing. Let me ask you this, because a lot of this work is about experiencing feeling, right? It's about, and how we feel and we feel inside affects the outside. So a lot of us, are kind of like boiling frogs, right? There are certain pains traumas that, stack up one by one. And we don't really typically change until that water gets too hot. But now that you've actually done so much work to let go of things, to regulate your nervous system, to come back to you, what does it actually feel like as just a human being, like as an experience for people who just might not even have that conscious awareness or something, a perception outside of what they experience in their daily life? So what's that like for you, that internal world?
mm. That's a fascinating question. I mean, it's so interesting reflecting back on how unlike the body that I lived in before and how I was so um I don't know, kind of like I was very ambitious, still ambitious, but I was like overly ambitious and I was like overly sensitive in relationships and do the abandonment stuff. And I was like overly sensitive with money and I just noticed like a general calming of my body and of my nervous system. And that allows me to be more objective when there's an experience. And even if I feel like a trigger, it's much more subtle. So then I can question myself as to like, oh, like I'm feeling that, I'm noticing that feeling of, guilt or whatever come up. And it won't steer me like it used to, which before it would steer me and it would unconsciously steer me and I would just feel like, oh, like that's what I feel. So I have to do that, but now it's like I've a much better awareness that it is only emotion. It is only a replay of past trauma. And then I can pause and allow it to move and I can ask myself a better question. I can, what would love do, for example, for me, right? Like what would be loving for them? And then I often come up with much more um, much more um, effective, loving, caring, creative solutions because they're sourced from love and not like regret or shame or guilt or fear. So yeah, it's really giving me different opportunities to show up like much more consciously, like who I want to show up as. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, I love seeing the journey, man. So, for those of us who don't know us, and could you give you this story because it's very interesting how we met. Do you mind sharing just how we met, how we ended up getting started, and what that was like?
Yeah, that's a good story. We were in Tulum. We were at Holistica, the yoga retreat center, and I was there because I'd had a breakup and I decided like life brought me there actually. I'd gone to a meditation retreat and then I followed a friend to Tulum and then he went to Holistica and I went with him and then I just decided it was a perfect place for me to do a bunch of inner healing work. and which it was I was like it was my monastery while I was there. And at the restaurant in Holistica, there's many people coming through, different like yoga yogis and yoga teachers and healers and entrepreneurs and all kinds of interesting people, travelers. And yeah, and I think we were having lunch, and then we were sitting with a Kundalini teacher who told me that I had significant abandonment trauma, and you like after he explained a little bit about what he sensed, like you also chimed in and explained that that's also what you focused on as well. And we started talking after, and I felt it matched up because from the other like therapy and such work I'd done. Um, but yeah, it took me a little bit of time to like, I don't know, let's say like convince myself that to take a leap of faith with
Mm.
with you because yeah, it was just new and I didn't but once we started, once I decided to just like it's time for me to like really heal this, like I I just made a decision. It was time for me to heal, full stop. And I just like all resources and effort and priority was going to go to that. And I remember like the first session we had, I had like a ton of anger that came out. It was like unreal. And it just showed me that there was like definitely something to this process, which was really cool. And after that, even that first session, my body started to like feel calmer, but it was really just like the beginning of the volcano kind of, because like for, 42 years, I'd been kind of storing up emotions and these kinds of things. So we had plenty to do. But yeah, it was, and then I started to talk again with my ex, and because I was doing much better. And then we had another breakup. And then that I feel like was just a gift from the universe to like give me another opportunity because I was noticing my nervous system was getting really sensitive again. I was starting to have panic attacks again and waking up really early. And I was just like, no, I'm not getting back into that really dark place. Like, this is life, God giving me this like wake up call. Like, all right, you got to finish your work. I have to finish the work. So then that's when I think we did like 3 or 4 calls a week. And just because it was like an acute emergency at that time. And to use the moment, they're like Peter Drucker says, never let a good crisis go to waste. So,
Good.
so I think it's Peter Drucker, maybe another guy, management consultant, I think, not Peter Drucker. Um, the and yeah, and just that breakup had given it just really stirred the pot so much deeply in me, and that was me working on a lot of my deep abandonment because that's what was triggered, and it wanted to come out, and like life was giving me that experience to do that, and that was really really powerful work where I just you helped to hold space and guide, and I'd built some skill to be able to do it, but I also like needed I feel like I'm benefited significantly from your space holding and your guidance and doing it together because this is like, in the beginning especially, it's a lot of like deep dark work and with like very little skill or like not so much skill from my side, from the client side. So there's like a lot like guiding and hand holding there like was critical to help me get to like basic basic competence and to build on that skill set. So yeah, um, that's that was kind of the beginning, and yeah, we've just continued from there. So yeah.
That's great, man. Now you're an emotional wizard. So now you have the toolkit, the experience, the competence to deal with these things on your own, right? And I just guide you to deeper and newer places and greater
Mm.
heights, right?
Exactly. Exactly. That's where we're feeling right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. One of like the most pernicious traumas, the most pervasive traumas as well that I people experience, particularly men that I work with. I work with
Mm,
mostly men. It is this abandonment trauma. This is,
mm,
like we talked about the root, right? There's this
mm,
tree, there's all sorts of symptoms we experience, whether it's anxiety or depression or needy energy. But in the end, right, it's these kind of core traumas that really just shake our root, our fundamental system. And a lot of people like yourself, including me when I started, we're not educated on these traumas, and they're so traumatic that we push them down. We try not to remember them, and we try to avoid them at all costs with distractions, with the phones, whatever. But could you speak a little bit about to people who are not so familiar? They're just starting to become aware of what's inside them, the reason they're acting the way they do. Just a bit about what is really the abandonment trauma, why, like, how does it affect you, like, and then when you actually work through it, what are the direct changes of actually working through that kind of energy, that trauma? What
mm.
did you experience?
It's a great question. So I think meditation means to become aware of, and like mindfulness is a form of meditation. So as I started to become more self-aware or awakening, whatever we want to call it, um, I I couldn't help but notice that I had had a string of failed relationships, and that I they all followed a similar pattern. And after where like it was like a honeymoon phase in the beginning, and then we didn't I didn't communicate well enough about my emotions, and they so they didn't either, and then we'd have a big blow up, and then we'd break up, and I would feel relief for like a couple of days, and then I'd feel this massive weight of sadness and regret and guilt and like depression come on to me, because I guess my body felt like it had been abandoned, kind of. And then I'd have to fight this depression. I just saw this like happen over and over and over. And like, even though I wanted love and I wanted to love, like this pattern kept happening. And I didn't really understand what it was. And I went to therapists, I went to psychologists, I did ayahuasca, like tried a bunch of stuff, but got into, um, I got into, attachment theory to help me understand that I had significant avoidant um, behaviors, and so I could kind of self-diagnose myself as like severe avoidant. But there were even moments when I felt extremely anxious actually as well. So it was just like avoidant and very insecure, and so I knew something was wrong, right? I knew there was a fire. I just didn't know what to do and how to do it. So how to help heal it. So I tried a bunch of different things, and they helped a bit, but I just and I would delay the problem. I'd improve my communication. I'd be chipping away at how I felt. I'd learn to open my heart more. And things were improving overall, but it still wasn't really like going to the root of it. I feel like I was kind of like chopping the branches of the tree, but not really, and like making progress. And like my behavior was better, my relationships were lasting longer, the conflicts were like less frequent and not as bad. But so it was trending well, but it wasn't like it was still all happening in the same formula. So Um, so I knew there was some deeper stuff. At one point I went to an adoption therapist who helped me do what's called rebirthing, where we did a regression into my birth to help me look for what beliefs I had around my birth, which I feel like was kind of similar to the work that we've done, um, but more cognitive, because I was still very cognitive at that time. So I didn't. I went into some of the feeling of it, but I didn't go deep into the feeling of it, like what we do, where we focus first on the feeling. It was um, for her it was a mix of story and cognitive and feeling. Um, So yeah, and that's what happened with the breakups that we were also experiencing while you and I were working together. And I'm just yeah, and I just got fed up. I just got literally to the point where I was just fed up with this pattern, and I'm just fed up with it. I'm enough at a point in life, like enough is enough, and I just, we anyone, I feel like we have a moment where we can just say enough is enough. I'm gonna change. That's it. Like I don't care what the effort is, if I need to go into the darkest part of my soul, if what it costs, like I'm just fixing it, right? Like that's it, right? I'm just enough is enough. Like that's it. And that's the level that I got to with this, where I just like decided firmly, like, fuck it, like enough is enough. I'm just done with this pattern. And pardon my French. And and
We.
yeah, exactly. And 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 I just like really doubled down and committed. And yeah, and that helped, that decision, help with your also with like the space holding and the guidance from you allowed me to and the goal that I had of like continuing to let out whatever was coming up, like, I mean, I didn't even know really what energy was coming out at the end of the day, or what emotional experience it was from. I can sometimes we could identify, oh, it's from that thing, and but it wasn't like that every time. Sometimes it was just energy coming up that was just we were just liberating. And um yeah, it wasn't until we really started to focus on the root of this stuff that I started to see major changes, which logically makes sense, right? If I was cutting all the branches off first, then like the roots are still there, right? So your approach of going first really to the roots and doing it in a safe way and building capacity and capability um, was very, yeah, it was really powerful. And that's why, I've renewed, I'm on my like third renewal here because we keep seeing progress. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's been amazing, man. And it's a great answer. So the abandonment, it's just such an important topic. So I just want to ask you one last thing on it, or talk about this last part. Well, there is the initial abandonment trauma. But in your case, you were adopted at an early age, and that inevitably comes with that, right, for a young child. Now, the second patterning that I see in a lot of people who have that trauma, which is basically everybody, if I'm being honest, men and women, but definitely men that I work with, is we learn to abandon ourselves, right? We
Mm,
learn to self-sacrifice and to say, yes when we no, and to live in other people's worlds, and to basically just be so externally focused that we lose ourselves. And part of the biggest journey and progress that I've seen within you is that maybe before, you would, and I was there too, be in that category of energy. But now you're much, much more centered and aligned, and you're putting
mhm,
yourself first, you're doing what you want to do. And it seems like it's giving you more life energy. And you just seem more grounded, you have more self-love, self-respect. So could you tell me a little bit about just what's that kind of like from that transition to just, caring so much about other people, people pleasing them, their needs, to this 180 that I've seen you've done of actually just going back within, taking care of yourself first, and operating from that really powerful place. What's
mm.
that like for you?
It's been absolutely fascinating to have this experience, especially as an adult, as a grown man, with the awareness to be able to compare before and after. So what I've seen before is that my body, you know, liked getting validation and love and approval externally. And um, this would lead me into relationships that weren't always that weren't the healthiest, keep me in friendships that weren't the healthiest, prevent me from having deep friendships with people that were really good for me, because they would see the incongruence and the self abandonment and lack of self love, because the vibration wouldn't be the same. Um, and it's just been so interesting being able to, I guess, first of all, like seeing how I was self-abandoning before, and then being able to have these dialogues with myself to really take care of myself and fill my own cup authentically. And it's something I didn't really understand before. I felt it was kind of cliche, and I felt I even was feeling it before. And I was kind of feeling it, but it wasn't with sustainable love. It was more like with quite transitory, more transitory experiences and such, rather than like really nourishing from the roots, from the depths. And and like one of the ways that it shows up really nicely now is like I like to host at my house often, and this is very much in a serving frame, right? Like in, in the in the same category, if you will, as people pleasing, because it is like externally focused about like making the event nice and making people feel welcome and enjoying and all that. However, the energy that I bring to it is from quite a lot of centeredness and like whole and non-neediness as like a result, because I'm already feeling quite whole. And I just see that the men and women respect me much more naturally because I don't need their love. I don't need their approval. Like they're my guests. So like they feel much more um appreciative of the invitation. And when I feel myself even kind of slipping into some people pleasing, I'll notice and I'll take a breath and I'll stand back and I'll notice them even like turn in more into a frame of giving me respect in that moment, actually,
Mm.
because they'll see that I didn't fall into perhaps how they knew me before or fall into like needing their approval. I just was like, I was fine. I was okay. I didn't need to fall into their joke or their tease or trap or whatever it was.
Sure.
And that results in, I can return the serve, but in a way that that results in them giving respect, more respect back, which is really nice. And and it's nice because there's also like due to this, there's less drama because people are treating me better. And um it's like what Jordan Peterson says. He says we don't want to be at the bottom of the social dominance hierarchy, right? It's like that's where people are living in survival and life is hard and there's lots of competition. We want to work hard, we want to do the work, we want to heal, do whatever necessary to get higher and higher in the social dominance hierarchy. And it's not just from a money perspective. Social dominance really starts from within and how we treat ourselves and how people treat us. Because even at a small party, there's like somewhat of a social dominance hierarchy. It's very biological in nature, right? Um, so um, yeah, that's been really interesting to observe different moments where I see people treating me differently in ways that essentially have like more respect because I've been respecting myself more authentically. That's the result that I'm seeing. Yeah.
I love that, man. And in our last conversation, I told you one of the greatest changes within our relationship was just how much I respect you. It's not that I didn't before, but it was just the power that you emanate now, that you radiate now as a man, as your authentic self, it just requires respect. You have to
Mhm.
respect it, right? Let me
Mhm.
ask you this, because a lot of this healing work,
Yeah.
sometimes we go into childhood, earlier times, and when we heal and make whole those earlier parts of ourselves, it has a natural effect on our masculinity, as men, because it trickles up the tree. So let me ask you this, just like, I work with mostly men, and so what's it like to actually how does it affect, your masculinity, that kind of energy when you actually do this inner work? How, you've done a lot of men's work yourself and other parts, other groups, but what could you say about that, about how this work affects, yeah, just the masculine energy and a little bit about that?
Hmm.
You've touched on about it just now a bit, but
It's
it's a great
interesting. Like
topic.
I would say that it's benefited my authenticity with both masculine and feminine energy because like
Mm,
the feminine energy is like it's that dance. right? It's me, it's the emotions, it's me feeling the emotions. You know, the masculine energy is the way I've seen it and learned it described is the witness, right? It's the consciousness is masculine energy. So this work is a is using both because it's leveraging the witness to be able to observe the feminine essentially, right? To be able to and allow the feminine to dance, right? So I actually have gained a better, more healthy relationship with both energies in myself, which frankly has allowed me to have a much better relationship, especially with the external feminine, because we've learned to feel a lot more. So I was explaining how my relationship, I had challenges in in
Mm.
intimate relationships before, and and I feel like I show up a lot better to the feminine now. And my girlfriend now is like extremely feminine. And I feel like hold a really good space for her. My feminine comes out as kind of like playful with her, which she really likes. But I also have like a strong masculine frame, which she really appreciates and feels safe with. So like I can hold that container for her so she can surrender into that container. And that's David Data's work and Tantra and all that. And yeah, so it's improved my relationships with both energies inside, which then has reflected outside with men. Like I told you before, how men like I feel more natural respect among my social group,
Mm.
um, and also former colleagues. Um, and I feel like that's definitely as a result of all this as well. It's all related. That's what I really am learning from all this is like before I saw how like we as humans really like to segment and segregate parts of knowledge like psychology and biology and the heart versus the mind versus the gut. You know, we love to separate things, but in reality, everything is intimately connected, and like
Yes.
in a positive effect on any part of the system can feed positively into any other part of the system. And from that paradigm, it has helped me to just look for whatever is whatever in me wants to move, whatever in me wants to be released and free, and to be more like to be non-judging of it, and just to and be very like gentle and allowing and accepting of it. Um, yeah, and that also helps me get out of my head into my body as well, and help and use my heart more for the work. So yeah.
Yeah, you're completely right, man. It's all interconnected, right? And you're totally right. We all like to segment things, the heart and the mind. They're two separate things, but it's all one. And let me ask you this, because you're unique in this respect. But a lot of my work, it's healing, spirituality, but I particularly work with very high-end business people, entrepreneurs like yourself. So you have a lot of experience in business, and you've done so many things. Do you mind just telling everybody, a little bit about your background, professionally, what you do and what you've been up to? Because it's
Yeah,
super interesting.
yeah, absolutely. I've got over 20 years in cybersecurity and large deals outsourcing. I'm personally responsible for about 100 million in sales and IT outsourcing deals and all the different components and aspects of those integration deals. Um, Done a lot of work in financial, retail, manufacturing verticals with global 500 size type companies. And I've owned businesses on the side as well, like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school, and been involved in a number of different startups. And now I do go to market strategy consulting for startups and small business. And on the side, I have like an investment portfolio with real estate and equities, and and leverage this yeah, and just I see it, it's all a way to, business is such a way, it's such a great vehicle for spiritual growth, just like a
Mm,
relationship is, because there's so much room for life, for God, the universe, whatever word we want to use, to like interact in those experiences, right? So it's, just like Michael Singer talks about in Surrender Experiment, he looks at every opportunity that came to him as if it was given to him by the universe itself, which it was, the way he describes it in that line. And yeah, so just very much in my surrender experiment right now, actually. So this is the book Surrender
good. Let me
Experiment.
ask you. So, like, you're very established in business. You have, yeah, all this, experience. And so, if, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, business guys. So, what could you say to them, who are kind of just getting new to all this healing stuff, the spirituality components? Why is that actually even helpful for their business? Like, how does that actually even play out in the business world and making money and all of that? Like, if they, who can't quite connect the dots at this point, what would you say about
Mm,
how does that all lend itself?
yeah. I mean, I've really learned that how I show up in a relationship is how I show up to myself. And also how I show up in my business is a reflection of myself, right? So like how I show up outside is how I show up inside. And that these these people and these experiences in my life are all mirrors,
Mm,
right? That life is a mirror. Life casts like a series of mirrors around us. And yeah, if my relationship's having challenges, then that's mirrors of what's happening in me. If my business is having challenges, it's mirrors of what's happening in me, right? So so it's very holistic for me to look inside myself for what's not working in a category of my life rather than looking outside. And oftentimes I can come up with better solutions. Like when I do like release a trigger, for example, of a sensitivity of you know, um, a conversation, a challenge I had with a business partner or a client, um, first of all, it can remove the conflict that we had, because that conflict was at least, partially in me, if not him as or him or her as well. And then secondly, it allows me to have that space to ask better questions, right? So like what would be, what's loving to me, what's loving to them? And when I sit and get still for a moment, then I will often come up with an even better solution that's going to be more successful and more sustainable and more profitable for that situation. So yeah, it's all together really, So it's leveraging that mirror, leveraging these mirrors like for us, for our growth and the growth of what we're putting our energy into.
for sure, man. I'd like to ask you this. It's very curious. Some people, spirituality, right? Like, sometimes I call myself a spiritual guide or, an advisor to, entrepreneurs. And people, this word might not mean so much to them. But as you go into this work and, it kind of starts off with this healing journey, but you move up the map of consciousness, which, if you, we'll show it another time. But yeah, it's a way of ascending in energy and how we feel emotionally, which correlates to how our spiritual being is. But what would you say? Like we've done, how does the spirituality fit into all this? We did some pretty crazy stuff like regression, and we even went to some past lives where I think we even, shared one or two. What could you talk about the spiritual realm of things in this work, and what's that like? What was that like going through all that?
Ah, it's I this for me comes from like Michael Singer, learning a
Mm,
paradigm that I've tested. I was raised Roman Catholic, so I was raised like religious and all that. And then I took a lot of time off from religion because I felt a lot of guilt and shame around it. And then I developed a spirituality basically. And Michael Singer's been a big part of that process with Surrender Experiment and Untethered Soul and his work. And I like his explanation that like everything is actually spiritual, right? Like everything is a spiritual experience, right? And if we, how can I classify that like one experience was spiritual and one experience wasn't spiritual, right? Like how how am I that objective as like a very small human in this entire universe to like differentiate which one is spiritual, which one's not? So it's either all experiences are spiritual or none are, right? And I like to think that like there's there's definitely something going on. And so that means I have to lean into it, right? And the more I lean into that belief that like everything's connected, everything's one, that it's all spiritual, right? That the more I'm able to flow with life, and then the less I suffer, which is good because before I was really good at making myself suffer because I resisted, and
Mm.
now I'm much more graceful and flowing with life. Of course, I have my moments. I mean, there's triggers and there's stuff that comes up, but this is just the universe is giving me an opportunity to touch my stuff so that I can let go of that. That, oh, I didn't know that thing was there. Let's do the work. So that's some of my experience in that area.
This has been great, man. I'd love to ask you as well, like for people who are watching in for the first time, maybe they're looking to do the work, getting started, maybe they've tried things before like yourself that haven't quite worked,
Mm.
and they're looking to me now to see, hey, can I really, help solve their problems? Can we get them to that next stage? What advice would you have for someone who's just peeking in from the outside and trying to figure this all out? And it can be such a confusing journey, this healing journey and problem solving and the spiritual path. What kind of just advice could you give them from someone who, was in that place, when we first started? I remember, there was some resistance of getting started and you weren't sure, and was this going to work for you? And it's completely irrational, right? But what advice would you have for them who are just getting started on this path like you
Mm.
were 6 months ago?
Yeah, good question. I'd say that, first of all, I had to really accept that something was wrong in my life. I had
Mm.
to just get really real with myself that there was like problems, and then I had to decide that enough was enough and I was going to change them. And I think we all have aspects of our life like this. And, for years I was just kind of like skirting around it and not going really into it. But, the life in its infinite wisdom kept turning up the volume. And and so I noticed that my body was like feeling really uncomfortable, right? And for some people, it can show up as, like for me, it was PTSD. For some people, it can show up as disease, right? For like stress related things, right? It can, but it was happening in my body, you know, and my mind was affected as a result of it, and the body was affected. It's a feedback loop, right? Everything's feedback loops in the body, in our physical, mental, emotional experience. And um, I started to look into to try to understand what was going on with my body, and I got into trauma work. And trauma is really popular as a concept nowadays, which is, I think, really good that we're waking up as a society to the effect of stress on the body and that it can cause significant dysregulation and in the body and knocking the body out of homeostasis, which can cause disease. And that it's a thing. It's a real thing. Like trauma is a real thing, and we're gaining a lot of insight into it. And that and there's many different approaches as to what to do, right? So it can, there's psychedelics and there's somatic experiencing and there's therapy and there's all kinds of stuff. So and and I think what I've learned is that the trauma healing experience, which is what was manifesting in my body, and I had a lot of pent up trauma energy. Let's label it that.
Mm.
That process of releasing all that energy was actually the exact same description for the spiritual process that Michael Singer describes as well, which is essentially like releasing all this stored energy in us, right? So it was two different names for the same process. And I can share now that I've done a lot of this and over the years, which through, like I said, like therapy and and psychologists and coaches and ayahuasca and mushroom experiences and all that stuff, that it was all like an attempt to help to release stuff. And so in my opinion, the spiritual process and the trauma healing process are really the same, right? They're one and the same. Um, and that for me, like the root of it was that I realized that I was not feeling. Wasn't deeply, deeply feeling. And I hadn't, because I hadn't learned to emotionally regulate as a child, and that was the doorway for me to be able to really start to do this work, to get really into the body somatically, and to use my consciousness to as the tool to in that process. And yeah, so it's all labels at the end of the day, if it's trauma healing or if it's spiritual or if it's whatever. I mean, it's whatever the person wants to label it in their for where they are in their journey, I think is irrelevant, because it's all um, going the same direction, which is to let go of these old stored energies in us that are causing us imbalances, to allow us to be more authentic.
Mm.
And I've learned that a lot of people that have been on this journey sooner or later will lean into the labels of spirituality, because it becomes more self-evident to them that that is in fact what's actually happening. But yeah, it can take a year, 5 years, 10 years, but many people do lean into that because they see the parallels in those teachings. So yeah, but it's whatever the person needs to help to solve the problems that they're consciously aware of, like I mentioned before. So yeah.
Very, very beautiful, man. Very well worded.
Mm.
And so just yeah, finishing off, just for people just they're right at the doorstep, maybe they're watching this right before getting started with me. Do you have any advice for them, before they jump into all this, what they can expect, whatever you have, a good advice for them right before they
Mm.
jump into all this?
Yeah. I mean, it all starts with a why. I mean,
Mm,
anytime I want to change, I have to have a big enough why. There's a saying that when we have a big enough why, we can handle any how. That's from I think it's from Man's Search for Meaning, I think.
hmm.
Um,
Viktor Frankl. Okay.
I think it was Viktor Frankl, yeah, because he was talking about, he was the one that was at the in the concentration camp, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so he noticed that people that survived had a reason why, and people who didn't survive didn't really have a strong reason, right? So everyone was in the same exact conditions, but some people just survived no matter what. And those people were like, I'm going to see my grandkids, or I'm going to tell people after the war, or whatever. So like for me, it was like I had to have a reason to actually do it. And for me, I just had to get really, really real with myself. Like, what's wrong?
Mm,
And to love, like, kind of like be loving enough to myself, which I found hard at those times, but to be like real enough, just like keeping it real, like to be real enough with myself to be like, there is a big problem. This isn't a small problem anymore. This is like a big problem, and I really have to fix it. I'm making a decision. So that's I just had to get really real around where I was, and to just to be able to have the leverage and the motivation to commit to change, right? Um, which we're in a habit machine. This machine like can change and will change. We just have to recondition it, right? And this work helps to do that, right? Um, so yeah, and then it's a matter of surrender. I feel like, with you do a good job of explaining how it works, and it's very somatic, right? So there's like understanding how it works, and there's understanding how it works. And this really only they only really come together through experience, right? And it just has to be practiced. And then noticing kind of what changes, like how I noticed how my triggers were less, and I noticed how my nervous system was more calm, and I noticed I was sleeping better, and it was just I was noticing, I wasn't forcing, but I was just paying attention, like, okay, is anything shifting? And yeah, so and then just keep doing the work, like really commit to it. So yeah, with especially with a goal. Like I had goals of really letting go of the shame and the guilt that I had known I had stored in my nervous system for years. And we did a lot of work to search
Mm,
for that and to let it out. And I wanted to see what life was like without all that. And you know, it's not surprisingly in a way, but also like a huge blessing in a way. Like it's dramatically better not having that weight around
mm.
kind of around my neck. So yeah, yeah, just giving it really, you know, enough is enough and then like committing and going for it. Yeah.
That's great, man. I love this wisdom. Thank you for sharing your experience. And this is the final question I have for you. So it's been incredible, man. It's been really an honor to be able to work together the last 6 months, and we're definitely not done yet. But is there any last things on your mind you want people to know, things you want to share, and any last things, final thoughts?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can never really know how good life can get.
Hmm.
So, like, what I felt like like my ceiling was before, due to my previous goals and conditioning and experience of life through all the quote unquote good and bad experiences, if you will. Like, now that I've made a lot more space for just life to work its magic, um, it's even better in ways that I never could have imagined, actually. So, and that's this work has really helped me to open up to flow and surrender more with life. And that's, yeah, just like Mickey says in the surrender experiment, it's like you know, making that experiment with life to believe that, yeah, life knows what it's doing. Yeah.
Wonderful, man. Yeah,
Mm,
as you were saying, right, there's levels to this work, right? We're on our third renewal. The
mm,
first time, we let go of all the panic attacks, the hard traumas, the really deep abandonment. The second time, right, you manifest a beautiful relationship, that I don't think you had before. You've grown so much as a man. Financially, you're doing better, it sounds like. And this next stretch, we got another 3 months ahead of us locked in, and
mm,
it's gonna be amazing, man, to see who you become, right? It's like we don't even know. But what's amazing about you is I admire about you is just your commitment and dedication to growth and learning, and yeah, the spiritual path is not ending, right? That's the whole point of the journey. Is it's a journey, and there's just different levels to it. So we're all climbing it together, and me too. And amen. It's been happy to walk this path with you as well. So
mm.
thank you for your time today. It's been an honor, pleasure. And I look forward to having you in Tulum in a few months when we're here. Maybe we'll do an update, under the palm trees on the beach, and yeah, some coconuts, and we'll talk more about what's changed and yeah, what else is going on. So thank you for coming on today. Of
Absolutely, brother. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
course. All right, bro. I'll see you soon.
All
Bye.
right, sounds good. Cheers, bud.